Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to give you a preview of the meeting. I'm calling it the G2 Summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing that is supposed to take place on the 14th. Donald Trump is flying to Beijing. He's going there after 8 years, and this meeting was long overdue. It was originally scheduled for April, but because of the war in Iran, it has been postponed, and now they are meeting this Thursday that is day after tomorrow. Basically, it's already 13th here. It's past midnight. So what is on the agenda? For those of you who have been following Conversations regularly, I've been making this point repeatedly that if there was progress on the ceasefire negotiations between the US and Iran, then while Iran will be one of the topics discussed, it might not overshadow the entire discussion between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. But it appears that Donald Trump has no agreement, no framework to move forward. We are where we were about 5-6 weeks ago when the ceasefire began, nearly 7 weeks ago in April. So basically there has been no progress in negotiations and talking points, except this awareness that as to what the two positions of the two parties are, and the huge distance between the positions of the US as well as Iran, and of course the complications that this tension is creating on the global economy. And we are fully aware now as to the potentially devastating impact that the blockade of Strait of Hormuz by Iran and the US for an extended period can have on the global economy, on inflation, on prices, etc. So that is where we are at the moment. So I was hoping that there would be some agreement, some broad understanding between the two countries. There was a lot of hope when J.D. Vance went to Islamabad and went and met with the Iranians during the negotiations there. But unfortunately, it was very clear that there is no real progress taking place. The two parties seem to be stuck. Donald Trump is only restating his positions again and again and again and threatening devastation. It is quite clear that he's not going to start military action until he has met with Xi Jinping. But there is a lot of reporting from inside the White House that Donald Trump is really getting very frustrated, and his frustration might lead to resumptions of kinetic action, which means that he'll start bombing Iran again. The Iranians seem to be prepared, and the radical faction of Iran, or the hardcore faction of Iran, which has taken over, the government is now more or less in the hands of IRGC. It is very clear that they are willing to face the US, and they feel that they are well prepared now to cause enough damage. I suspect that if the United States were to hit Iran, Iran is just going to focus on just UAE, maybe occasionally throw a drone or a missile towards Israel or US assets in the region, but it will target United Arab Emirates primarily. That's what I suspect. And that's what it did last time when there was a skirmish with the US during the ceasefire. So anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is that the Iran issue is going to dominate the discussion between Beijing and Donald Trump. A lot of things have changed. So for example, when Donald Trump said in his first term that no one should buy oil, India used to buy a lot of oil from Iran. India stopped buying oil right away. But the Chinese did not. They continued buying. They made adjustments to the financial situation. The US was essentially using the international financial system that it controls to levy secondary sanctions on countries that bought oil from Iran. And so Iran has only one market, which is China. And so 90% of Iranian exports, oil energy exports, have been going to China. For China, it's getting at discounted prices, and so it has spawned a small, it's called teapot refineries, so small companies which are refining Iranian oil, and they don't do anything else, so it's very difficult for the United States to sanction them. The way the United States success is, so for example, let's say that you are a businessman and you are doing business and a huge chunk of your business is with the US or with the West or any other country, with India even. And then you start doing business with Iran, and then the US can impose sanctions because all the transactions are taking place through SWIFT and dollars, etc. So the US can sanction you. And if Iran's trade with Iran is a small part of your business, you don't want to lose your bigger business for the profits you think you will get from Iran. And so most people avoid it. That's why India doesn't buy Iranian oil. And then India also stopped working with the Chabahar port. But the the Chinese continued, and 90% of Iranian oil is bought by the Chinese, which is, I think, about 10 to 12% of all oil imports by China. But this time, when the US imposed further sanctions, the Chinese said, your sanctions are illegal, we will not respect them. This was the first time that the Chinese simply took an antagonistic position towards the US sanctions. In the past, they just said, oh, we are adhering to it, and they would just go around it. So Chinese would say, oh yeah, they would give a lip service, and then they'll say, but the Chinese have been pushing this even during BRICS. If you go back and look at the BRICS summits that were held in Russia and China, one of the items on the BRICS final statement was condemnation of unilateral sanctions. So the US imposing sanctions is not international law. It is just the US bullying the world. It has legitimacy only if it comes through the United Nations or the Security Council, which is also part of the UN. So, and only under that circumstances is China willing to accept that as part of international law. So what the US is doing is essentially, it's just part of US foreign policy. And so the Chinese this time have to look, we are going to buy whatever we want from Iran. You can't impose sanctions, they are illegal. So that is something that is pressured. But something else has changed on the US side too. It appears that unlike in the past few years when the United States were determined to contain China and its development and its growth and its rising power and its influence in Asia, and that's what the Indo-Pacific strategy was all about, and that is what the Quad, of which India, Japan and Australia are a part of, was to balance. This was a club of democracies trying to balance China. Now it appears that under Donald Trump, the United States has undergone a significant shift and change in its grand strategy. And that change is that the US is willing to accommodate China rather than, shall we say, contain China. Which means that there is a tacit acknowledgement in the United States that China has become a powerful player. And because China now has become a powerful player, the US does not feel that it is in a position to bully China as it is, say, bullying Iran. And so I think that you are going to see that Donald Trump is he's not going to pick a fight with Xi Jinping in Beijing. He's going to come back with a lot of concessions, symbolic and otherwise, to China. Ursula von der Leyen had gone to China before she met with Donald Trump, but she was unhappy, and so the rapprochement that we thought the European Union would make with China did not take place, and so she came back, and then EU immediately then signed the deal with the US, where there will be zero tariffs on US goods, and the US will impose 15% tariffs on all European exports to the US, including European Union is going to buy some 600 or more billion dollars in investments and trade, etc. So the agreement that was made after the Europeans could not come to terms with the Chinese. It appears that the Europeans are more willing to adopt a hostile posture towards China than the US. Even though in the past few years there has been steady decline between the trade between the US and China. In my previous show, I did share some data. If I can find the data, I will share it again with you. But it does appear as if that there is a steady decline. So I found the data. So let me show it to you. So if you look at this, this is the trade between US and China in 2024 and 2025 and the first quarter of 2026. So the total goods trades between US and China was 545 billion in 2024, and then it went down by 135 billion, 131 billion in 2025. This is the whole tariff war that the US and China had. But even US exports went down by 30% from 143 to 106. But what is interesting for Donald Trump is that you can see that the trade deficit has declined significantly from 295 to 200. So nearly $100 billion of trade deficit has decreased in the past 2 years. And that is because the imports from China are beginning to fall. So it went from 545 to 404. And if you look at the imports, it went from 400 to 300. So $100 billion of less imports because of higher tariffs from China. So yet still, if you can still see the trade between the two is $100 billion in the first quarter. So that means at the end of 2026, the total trade will be around $400 billion, which is a significant amount for the United States. It will be, I think, now with the trade, the biggest trading partner for the U.S. was Mexico, then Canada, then China. And if you look at European Union as one unit, then European Union was also a major trading partner. So nevertheless, the Chinese fall in the top four trading partners for the U.S. and it's huge amount of trade. And the exports are also over $100 billion. So the first agenda is going to be trade and tariffs. So I don't know whether there'll be any agreement upon what to do about Iran, because Iran is not there at the negotiation table. But they will come up with some framework and some common ground on Iran. So they will say, well, we expect Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz should be open. That will be one major line because it's damaging global economy, etc. So the next item after discussing trade will be artificial intelligence and U.S. ban on exporting semiconductors to China and the Chinese control of rare earth minerals and magnets. So there was a temporary agreement that was made last year, so they are going to continue with that negotiations about that. There are also technical discussions about artificial intelligence, about setting standards, shared standards. We don't want two worlds with different technical specifications and technical standards and legal standards. So it will become impossible, as it is when you travel through China. And I did travel through China last year. It becomes very difficult just negotiating the internet, especially if you're so dependent on Western companies like Google and YouTube and etc. Expedia, none of that works in China. As it is, it's like being on a different planet when you're trying to negotiate and navigate the internet without a VPN in China. The third thing that they're going to talk about is basically Taiwan. And a lot of people are worried that Donald Trump might say something which might weaken Taiwan's position vis-a-vis China. So the current position of the U.S. is strategic ambiguity, which means they do not want to commit to supporting Taiwan to such an extent that Taiwan declares independence and provokes a war between U.S. and China. So they want to keep Taiwan guessing, and they also want to keep China guessing because China doesn't know that if it invades Taiwan, whether the U.S. will defend it or not. So the possibility that the U.S. will defend Taiwan prevents China from invading Taiwan, and the possibility that the U.S. may not defend Taiwan prevents Taiwan from declaring its independence. Well, by the way, this meeting is going to take place between Trump and Xi Jinping at a place in China called a Temple of Heaven. And I actually went there last year in November. I just want to share quickly some photographs with you. It's a very magnificent and spectacular place, very stunningly beautiful. So I spent about an hour at the Temple of Heaven, and it's magnificent, and it's definitely going to impress Donald Trump for sure, because there's nothing like this in Washington. So this is the Temple of Heaven. This is gates, etc. So this is where Donald Trump is going to be meeting with Xi Jinping. So the agenda is they will talk about Iran, they will talk about trade, they will talk about semiconductors and artificial intelligence. Then we will definitely talk about Taiwan. So I think these are the four prominent issues. And then, of course, the fifth, which is trade related, where the US is going to really push China to buy more of America's agricultural products like soya beans and other things. And the US, I think China is open to that because it gives them leverage for next time when the US then does something unilateral, then they can stop buying soya beans and hurt American farmers and put pressure on Trump. So I think China will start buying. So it's going to be a very, very interesting meeting for other countries, especially those who are very closely allied with the US, like Europe, Japan, South Korea, and India will be watching this meeting very closely. They want to make sure that, look, any close relationship between China and US is not good for India, is not good for Japan or South Korea or Europe. All of them want to see tension between US and China, and therefore their importance increases. But if China and the US become friendly, then the importance of other middle powers becomes irrelevant. So for example, if China is not a threat to the US and China becomes a strategic partner, then the US doesn't need India or the Quad or Australia or Japan for that matter. Then they don't need to transfer technology to India. They don't need to invest in India. They can just deal with China. And so therefore it is in the interest of a lot of countries in the world to make sure that China and the US are not friendly. Even Iran, for example. Iran, I'm sure that while Iran has declared that China is their greatest ally and so on and so forth, at the back of their mind they're also worried, like the Taiwanese, will Donald Trump sacrifice us for better relations with China? Or will Xi Jinping sacrifice us? This is for Iran. Iran is worried that Xi Jinping might sacrifice Iran to have better relations with the US. And Taiwan is worried that the US might sacrifice sacrifice Taiwan for better relations with China. So yes, so a lot is at stake. The same for Philippines, the same for Australia, the same for Japan, the same for South Korea. Just as Europe is dealing with Ukraine, they're constantly worried that Donald Trump, in order to improve relations with Russia, may sacrifice Ukraine. And therefore, which he has done to a great extent. Ukraine now only relies on Europe for financial and military aid. So anyway, that's what I think is on the agenda in Beijing. So please stay tuned, subscribe to the channel. If you have not already done so, like this video, press the bell icon, share this video with your socio-political network, and continue to watch because I'm going to be watching the meeting very closely. I wrote a piece after Donald Trump's meeting with Xi Jinping in Busan last year in October. It was very interesting. I traveled to the region after that article of mine came out. So I was in Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong I went to China with a colleague. And while we were traveling there, people in South Korea read my article about the meeting in Busan, which is in South Korea, between Donald Trump and I call it G2 Summit. It was published in The Diplomat, which is widely read in the world, especially on Indo-Pacific issues. And then I got invited to South Korea. So I went to Seoul and talked about US-China and US-India relations. And so it was interesting. So I will continue with that conversation. So please stay tuned. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.